Okay, this is probably the first like serious video that I've ever made. So even though I know there's going to be like a really funny title, or my attempt to be funny, it's still a guide that like I really wanted to make because samurai as a whole is just really underused. For some reason, it got bullied like completely out of the meta by random people just because they disliked how some people played with it. But its usage rate just plummeted, especially among good people. There's like 5 good samurais, and maybe 3 of them actually main samurai. So even though it's probably, in my opinion, one of, if not the most fun abilities to use and fight in the game, I don't know what happened. And before I go on, I was gonna write like a whole script for this, but I got lazy and I thought it'd be better if I just did it completely off the top of my head. Well, I'm still gonna follow some of like the things that I wrote down for this, so it's not completely like off my head. I don't know if I want to actually do other guides on stuff like cars, since I actually mean it, and I think it'd be better than the samurai guide. So if people actually find this helpful, I might make another one. So for the first proper guide that this game's like actually seen, I'm gonna cover samurai in almost its entirety. I don't think I'll be able to delve that much into specific matchups, or at least I don't think I want to, because specific matchups are really like case by case in this game. But this is mostly to just help some people pick up samurai or just learn the basics of it, and maybe even apply it into some other abilities like Shadow of the World or hell cars, because a lot of what I say could be more seen as like fundamental. Before I get into like specifically how to use it or like the parts of its kit, it's important to get into why it's disliked, or in a better way to look at it, more importantly for the context of this video, I think it's a little easier if I show you rather than tell you how not to play samurai, because it's kind of like a generalization. There's not necessarily a wrong way. I think that this specific way is just really limiting on how good you could actually get with it. If all you want to do is win and like don't care about improving at all, playing like this is fine. I don't blame people for playing like this because it's an easier way to play, but I'll break down the video and like what I think you should do after it. But yeah. Since I started recording this, the game actually updated, so the game looks kind of different. But nothing changed with samurai, so everything like should be fine with what I say here, probably for the foreseeable future at least. So samurai at its core is really like movement based, without a block to really rely on. You're kind of forced to have like good spacing, good movement, whatever. So that's where things kind of go wrong. People, this is, what the hell? Huh. Okay, well, people try and think of movement as just staying away from people, which is kind of what I tried to show in that clip that you just saw. But trying to approach it this way is kind of flawed in my opinion, because even if you're like not in range of them, you're still limiting your own options. A lot of what samurai could do, especially like high damage options, aren't possible with like when you're far away from them. So your main goal is to try and close distance without being hit, which I know sounds hard, especially like doing it if you're already used to being passive is kind of difficult. But in reality, it's not as hard as you probably think it is. All it really takes is just some like practice. Samurai is really like versatile stand or spec, I mean, and its hitboxes are really good, with a lot of it being abusable with different mechanics. So for example, with Y, it's move stackable with during C. So ideally, you want to use Y as soon as you use C, because in that way, your animation is a little bit more hidden. I think it's easier to do if you do C first then Y instead of Y then C. But while you're doing that, your main goal should be trying to turn with the Y. Because when you turn with the Y, I think I'll try and show it here, your hitbox actually goes further than it would if you just stood still. That's one of the best ways to not only get damage, but get damage like consistently. Another part of Samurai that people don't abuse because of how they play is RF. I think I showed it in like the last few seconds, but if you dash with your R, your F is confirmed. Like, I know it shows there that they had like a red thing, but that's just because of these dummies. If you're higher than maybe 10 ping and you use F as soon as, I don't know how to confirm it because I never like labbed with Samurai that much, but you have to R first, then dash, then F. There wasn't true, but as soon as that mark appears, as long as you did it fast enough, it's guaranteed to do 60, 70 damage. Like, R does 30, F does 50, that's 80 damage right there. That's your win con against a lot of abilities. And it's not really possible unless you dash with R, or you R then dash. Like, if you don't dash, then that's not true. An important part of this is actually landing like a raw R. Since it's only true off dashes into F, the only way to actually land R is something that I'll bring up in a little bit, but you have to have actual like good spacing and movement as you approach. So a lot of people in this game like to just approach with a dash move, which is, it's fine in reality. Like, you won't like lose games if you don't approach like that most of the time. But in a higher level, you're kind of forced to actually move in with just W, A, S, and D. But a large gap in high level and low level is how they use W, A, S, and D. A lot of people just walk up to them without trying to like without trying to fully use their movement, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Especially on Samurai, with your jump, you have a better jump power than most things in this game. So in reality, you're not moving in just like 4 directions, you're moving in 5. You need to keep in mind, like, you have jump, which is something that you should keep in mind in general, because just jumping usually messes with your hitboxes enough for you to land hits and you don't get hit. So as you're trying to go for an RF, you just kind of need to just walk in almost like you're trying to circle around them. There's different abilities, and like, you should approach them differently accordingly. Like with Samurai, since the sword is on the right, most of their hitboxes are also on the right. So you want to approach from like their left side. So instead of coming from here where they could just get an R, instead they'll actually have to turn their camera to hit you, and so most of the times they'll mess up, or they just don't know that that's how it works, and they'll, you know, mess up. Outside of just spacing, RF is probably what differentiates like good Samurai from bad ones. It's probably your best option, like, without a doubt. It's something that you want to try and do basically every time, because Samurai F done completely like alone raw is really unreliable. Like, it's one of the most like common options by samurais, but that's just because everyone that fights samurai doesn't really know how to fight samurai, if you understand what I mean. They're the kinds of people that bullied it out of like people using it. Basically, they don't really know how to avoid F completely, like just done raw. Because while you're fighting samurai, one of the most important things is to track their F, or at least pay attention to how they use it, because someone that does RF is someone that's just usually way better at samurai than someone who just does raw. Because if you do raw F, you could usually punish it, like at worst or at best, and at worst you just take 5 damage when you block it. Since samurai F, if you just block it, regardless of your block duration, like you take 5 damage. Which sort of brings us back to like what else differentiates good samurai from bad ones is spacing and movement as a whole. You want to try and abuse like how your hitboxes linger and movement. You have higher walk speed and better jump power than most things in the game, so at least with M1s you want to try and like move back while you're M1ing, because if you do that, the hitboxes linger and you won't be able to, they also won't be able to hit you. I'll try and put like some of what I said into like practice here, because someone I know joined. It's a little difficult to actually do like properly, but a lot of this is just spacing and knowing how to use my moves. Like you saw there, I tried to use my Y like while turning. Samurai also is very C, like having good dashes and knowing when to use your T and when not to. F also worked there because I was slowed, which shouldn't really be done like normally, because if they avoid it, it's really bad. But if you are slowed and have no other options, your first instinct is usually to try and use X and get out of it completely. But X is a really bad tool. It's only good in mirrors and like specific situations where you can't avoid an F because you already used up C against samurai, but for the most part it's just not reliable against anything like Shadow of the World or anything that has a bunch of combos. You just take a lot more damage than you would otherwise. So actually looking back at the clip, I realized that I didn't fully explain like how to use F. F should be prioritized with RF, but there are different options to use F outside of that. Like against Shadow of the World, since they can't actually block it, or they can't block it during standoff mode, if you notice they unblocked and they have already used their counter, that's usually a free F. Because that's like single frame that they unblock, they're usually going to TP aerial or try and do something with stand on E. Since they have no other options like with stand on, or standoff I mean, they'll be vulnerable to raw F. And another way I used F was to get out of like slowing or possible combo starters. Since F travels distance regardless of like if you're in ragdoll or not, the only way that people can actually like counter your F like really well is if they stun you when you're moving. So with ABD as a whole, different types of stuns, like Samurai M1 stun, if somebody dashes during it, like when they're hit, they'll be stuck in place. Same thing applies to your F, same thing applies to your own Cs. So one way they can both punish Samurai and use it correctly is by making sure that you don't use F or C like during a possible stun or a possible hit. If it's just a flat out ragdoll, like Cars H or Cars R, it'll just ragdoll you in place and you'll go flying with F. So that's like a good way to avoid getting comboed by cars as a whole. As for M1s, a lot of it there was, I guess, baiting. Since Samurai, you have to try and make them use mobility moves, since you know, F is really avoidable and your R is really avoidable with just a normal roll. You want to make them waste it, so threatening to go in with M1s along with your own like proper spacing and going back and forth with M1s, which this should just be done regularly with like whatever you use. It lets you put pressure and proper pressure, because I see a lot of people with Samurai especially just doing this, like they're just doing nothing and spinning around. This does nothing. Like if you're fighting anyone with half a brain, doing this is just you're too distracted on your own movement, if you get what I mean. Like, your movement should be a priority, but you should also know like what your opponents do and what they want to do. If you're just spinning in place, they're going to punish you. Like, there's no way you're not gonna get punished. And even if you do avoid their hit, if they have something like while this can be countered with Y, if they're pushing in and you go C and you go C away, dash away, they'll be able to follow you. Something cars really like to do that you have to watch out for is when you use their C, they'll push in and use their F, because that's just a free 50 damage. They'll push in, use, and it also lunges them forward. So even if you're faster than them and slightly away from them, the F will hit. You can exit, but it's just you get comboed for like 80 damage afterwards. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but it was a little bit vague on C usage. It's an important part of mobility as a whole, because with Samurai, your C is improved, not only with distance, but also the cooldown. It's 2.5 instead of 3. So you could be a bit more lenient with how you use it, but as a whole, your dash should only be used meaningfully. So if you're gonna guarantee against something like Cars or Shadow of the World, you have to guarantee a ragdoll or at least some stun chip damage. So dash M1 is good, but you have to make sure you don't dash into the person, because if you dash into the person, they're just gonna do a move and you get punished. You have to dash past them while still hitting them, because then you're far enough away and most of the time they can't really recover. But against some things, that's not possible. So that's where you use your movement and your spacing as like together with your M1s rather than dashing. This is still good to just have, because if you jump while dashing as well, you go further. But your best options are still almost always going to be dash Y and dash R, not only because of RF, but, and because of the earlier reasons with why Y is one of your best moves. But these moves also buff ragdoll. So even if you're like, by the time they get up, your dash is back. It doesn't matter like what happens. You're not getting punished. At least for R, it's fine if they block it, because most of the time you're far enough away where they can't punish you. But with Y, it's a little bit more risky. It doesn't launch half as far, so you'll still be able to get punished. So I realized I didn't talk about E that thoroughly. I'll mention it in a second, but E, most of the time, it's hard to kind of land it from like without any confirms. But one way to land it is to punish them from aggroing you. So even if you're focused on being aggressive, there's always moments that you should be like a little bit passive. For example, if Cars or Shadow of the World, like you just use dash and they're about to approach you, when they're like Shadow of the World is using aerial E, it'll be an easy punish. I'll put a video of like how I used E, and in Shadow of the World aerial E's you. They don't have iframes during that, and if a car is pushing after you and they use R, they're still stunned, or they're not able to use moves during that. So it's an easy E, and that's 25-50 damage. Even if they do hit you, there's a chance if they're on top of you that your E still hits. So but with R, you can land E's after, and Y, if they're at a wall, I think you can land E's. That I have to test, but I don't really test things with this. Most of it is just kind of knowing what works when. So practice, basically. As for specific matchups, I said this at the start, but it's a very case-by-case scenario. Not everyone plays the same. Not everyone plays differently. I know a lot of people that just play passively and think that'll work against Samurai, but most of the time it doesn't unless you're also passive. But you want your M1s are going to be your main source of damage with Y as well. Y is your best chip option with RF and R in general and F in general, just being really good options to win games, especially against lower HP stuff. A single F could win like an entire game. Another thing I didn't properly go over was proper neutral game. Since spacing is so important, you want to have good neutral on top of it. Basically, your neutral game is just a mix of what I've already said with good M1s, with Y, and proper E's. So another part of the video was that I used E when the guy was just coming out of the goal, which is fine, but sometimes you're going to want to be a little bit careful with some stands like Shadow of the World especially, that can counter your projectiles for some reason. That can basically lead to losing a game. At least for the Shadow of the World matchup, it's a lot different with other things, but a single interaction usually wins or loses games against Shadow of the World. You want to be a lot more careful how you play against them, but it's still winnable as a matchup. It's just a bad one against good ones, against good Shadow of the Worlds. So you want to have good M1s, you want to be careful with how you use E's, but you still want to aim at where they're going. So if this dummy was walking forward, you'd want your E's to be slightly ahead of him. This is just like kind of common sense, but some people don't really get it. You want to aim at where they're going instead of where they are. Where they are. I think at like a high level, aiming towards them might work sometimes, because people, like, if the E is coming at them, they'll move to the left and then right to avoid like future E's. So if you aim at the dummy, it might hit them just by out of luck, but they'll usually like iframe it or something. But you should be aiming at where they're going, as a rule of thumb. It's really important though in your neutral game to not play like you're scared. Not like making fun of someone or anything. It's just something that I notice a lot. People play like they're scared to get hit. It's an inevitable part of the game, and it's something that you shouldn't really be scared of. Hit trades especially are really important to winning and losing games. You're going to take damage from someone. If your goal is to flawless someone, you're kind of playing the game wrong. Like, cool, sure, flawlesses look cool, they look flashy, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's a one-off thing and you'll never recreate it again. What's the point? You're not getting better, the other person you're fighting isn't getting better, you're just playing without really thoughts on your mind. You're playing to look cool, I guess. And when you're playing ABD, you shouldn't be playing to look cool. Like, who are you, bro? But yeah, just play how you want to play, but do not play scared. Like, nobody wants to play scared all the time. Should you be cautious? Yes, I think being cautious is an important part of the game, because everyone does different amounts of damage values. But playing scared and not wanting, like, you should avoid hits, but you should avoid hits with your spacing and good movement, not by just not approaching at all. That's just not how you play the game. That's not how you'll win matches. It's just how you just stall out matches that you'll end up losing anyways. Best thing you could do is just experiment, see what you like, see what works for you, and see what works in general. Because the more you experiment, the better you'll get in, like, with Samurai and at the game as a whole. I think I covered basically everything I wanted to. I might be missing one or two things, but I could probably edit it and add it in later. But I might make more videos on like how to use cars and how to use Shadow of the World independently, because they're also both fun to play and I'm also good at both of them. I think I could go more in depth with cars especially, and with Shadow of the World I could probably be more like mechanic sided than Samurai, because Samurai is like a really fundamental based ability, I guess. If this did help you, I don't want to be that kind of person, but please let me know. I want to make more, so I don't know if these will like be helpful for anyone. Very quickly, I wanted to thank Sumi for the music that's played throughout this video, and I wanted to thank my old friend Flower for drawing like those little stick figures that were at the start, because I really like how they look. But unfortunately, most of the video is just gameplay, but that's whatever. I want to thank those two. They're very cool people and very talented, much more talented than me. So, thank you.